This is going to be a short tutorial for new poets or any poet at any level of writing. So you could be an advanced master poet, but this is definitely really good for new poets, poets who have never written a book of poetry before and want to write some great poetry, stuff that they can most likely get published or may receive awards and may be a part of a book that will sell. And I'm going to give you a few tips, okay? I'm not going to give you all the tips because those are for my OnlyFans members of my OnlyFans, but I will give you a few tips here. So I highly recommend that you get you a poetry exercise prompt book, one that actually has example poems in it and a step-by-step lessons. So step-by-step lessons. So here we have the book, The Poetry Gymnasium. And it is one of the best books I know that I have read that will help you to write poems without struggle, without much sweat. This book and the book called Writing Personal Poetry by Sheila Bender. Those two books are really good. It's called Writing Personal Poetry by Sheila Bender. And this book we're looking at right now called The Poetry Gymnasium by Tom C. Hunley. I think he has a part 2 to this book. I think there's two books of his series. So what you're going to do is you're going to look through and you're going to find an exercise, a poetry exercise that you really like, that you're really interested in doing. So here we have here is the picture that. Basically, it's like a photograph poetry writing exercise, which is one of my favorite ones to do. Now, there are various ways you can write poetry using visual art. However, this is one of the fastest way and easiest way for new poets, especially inexperienced poets, to write poetry using photography. So we're going to zoom in here. Excuse me. Zoom in. So we can kind of have a look at this, what it say here. Oh, y'all, it bounced around. But we'll get back down here. So basically, you're going to write a poem based upon a photograph. So here he says to use a photograph as a way to imaginatively re-enter and explore key moments from the past. Now, the thing is, it doesn't have to be in the distant past. But I like using photographs that are older, like at least a few years old, because then I haven't been so close up on it and it's not intimidating to write about. And I will remember things related to that photograph that I really must remember. And those will be the things that are probably more important to put in my poem, to make my poem, to be a part of creating my poem. Excuse me, y'all. I have allergies. So here he has background. So he talks about how writing about poetry basically can help break writer's block. So he says you can, I said writing about poetry, writing about photographs. Y'all, it's early in the morning. So he has photograph, postcards, paintings, and so on, as you see here. So you don't have to just use a photograph. You can use postcards, paintings, and so on. The so on part meaning you can actually also use photographs, like pictures you've taken of copyright-free film or movies. So let's say you have a copyright-free public domain movie or film, which means you can use it pretty much any way you want. And it's, let's say it's copyright free. You can take a picture of certain scenes of that movie or film and use that picture as your muse or inspiration for a poem. So here he talks more about different types of photos. So you can actually do a series. So let's get into that. If you're using the photography approach for using photos to write poems, you can choose a series. So maybe it could be all vacation photos, or it could be all birthday photos, birthday party photos. It could be all special occasion holiday photos. And so you can go through your album, you can pull out photos that's all themed on certain things. It could even be cat photos. So you can take photos or even little snapshots or little mini short films of your cat, and you can use those as as inspiration for your poem. So they don't have to be photos. It could be your own film work. So you can take little like short films of your cats, like 30 days filming my cat, doing different things, and all of that, different activities, and then you can use all those films to write your poems based upon those little films that you took of your cat. That's just an example. Or you can do it as photos. You can use photos. You can even research public domain, copyright free vacation photos, and you can use them for your poems. Now, the thing about using photos, you don't want the whole poem to be based upon only what you see in the photo. You need to have some moments of flashbacks or some other stuff in the photo to kind of give some sort of backdrop or background of events that might have been going on when the photo was taken, or a little bit more information about the people in the photo, or conversations that people might have had, the people who are in the photo, conversations they might have had before or during when the photo was taken. So try not to just put everything that you see in the photo. Don't just let that be everything that's in the poem. You have to have other stuff. Now, getting into that is a deeper lesson, and that's like a paid lesson. I can teach you more about that part of writing the poem. But this is a great way to get some stuff down on the paper using photos, especially, or postcards and paintings. You can even look up postcards that are from a certain place. So you can look up Paris postcards, postcards of Paris, or postcards in Paris. But of course, you want to kind of make sure that they're public domain or copyright free, or you have permission to use them to write your poems. Or, as I said, you can take other approaches to use postcards, paintings, and photographs. But the other approaches that you can take, I only offer to teach them for a small price. So the first approach I'm teaching you for free in this video is what you see. Okay, what you see in the photo, the sensory, and all of that. Using sensory as the photo. So you're definitely going to take the usual route, using all your senses: smell, hear, feel, touch, and also the internal sense that you have when you connect to different things in the photo. So you're going to write a list of like smell, hear, see, feel, touch, plus the internal and kinesthetic type feelings. And you're not going to think of any literary devices. You're just going to kind of mind dump on the page everything that you see in the photo. Okay? But make sure you have the photos already selected. So I would say have at least 10 photos already chosen to pick from. Make sure that the photos that you're choosing evokes an emotion, like almost immediately. So if you immediately feel an emotion when you connect to a photo, then that is one of the photos you should use as your muse or inspiration for a poem in your book. Of course, you can title your poetry book after the type of photos. You can call it lazy vacation photos. And you can have all the poems based upon things that you do when you're being kind of lazy on vacation. And all those photos show what you do. Okay, that's just a sort of theme idea you can use. And people do different things that they consider to be lazy for them when they're on vacation. So try not to go with the usual cliche of type of photos that everyone use to express a certain thing for a certain thing. You should also be pulling up a list of emotions. You can go online and find a list of emotions to base your photos on. So let's say you want to write about a certain emotion. You look on the list of emotions, pick the emotion, like maybe it's frustration. So you're going to look up photos that express someone being frustrated about something they're doing or something that's going on. And then you're going to use all those photos to write poems that expresses the emotion, the feeling of frustration. Of course, you're going to use those photos, the images, the sensory that you grasp from the photos. So you can slow this video down if you want to read his instructions. Okay, you can always rewind the video. Notice that, and I say his because the book is by Tom C. Hunley. Once again, it's called The Poetry Gymnasium. And notice he has a student example. Notice that this student is writing a poem based upon a photo, I guess, where he's in running water. So as kids, you know, we've played in fountains, we played in fire hydrant water, we played in lakes, we played in rivers and seas. That could be a whole thing. You can write poems based upon photographs that's all by water, or you in water, or things that are going on near water, or things that you've experienced at water sites, water type sites, even reservoirs. So this person could make a whole book out of the theme of water, but he would have to make sure he has enough photos that has water in it as his inspiration for the theme of his book. There's a girl who wrote a book. It's called Life on Mars. I think she won a Pulitzer Prize, and all her poems are based upon, I guess, like what would go on Mars or life on Mars. And I think her father was actually a researcher for Mars or something, and that was her inspiration. So you're going to do it using photographs. If you can't conjure up the imagination of the photos. So some people have a very powerful imagination. They could just imagine a whole bunch of photographs in their head and use what's in their mind, their mind's eye. But if you can't, you can go get the actual photographs. Remember that when it's copyrighted, you may end up getting in some trouble using copyrighted photographs as your inspiration for your poems if you're writing directly what you see. Too much of what you see in the photograph. Someone may say, hey, that's based upon my photo. Often photographers won't get mad if you do that, provided that you just give credit. So if you use their photos and you're using exactly what you see in the photo, and it is as being lines in your poem, you should actually credit the artist or the photographer. If the work, if the photos, the visual art is not copyrighted and not public domain, when you get into public domain visual art and you're using that to write your work, there's not much people can do you don't have to give credit. Of course you can say, hey, this poem is based upon this photograph of this public domain work. Of course you can do that. But as I said, be careful of just having all your imagery based upon what you see in the photo, because you never know who used that same photo. This is why it's better to learn the different ways to approach writing poetry based upon visual art. And it can even be safer, legally safer, to use your own photographs, your own visual art, or just use copyright free and public domain artwork or photographs or paintings. So here he has it. Now, what you're going to do when you use example poems to teach you how to write poetry based upon photographs, you're going to see how the writer did theirs. So this is by Ashley Stone. If you notice, she has like things that they're doing, like running in circles, I sank, shifting my gaze. And she has like imagery, branches jut out. So if you want to write your lines directly out from the start, you can, or you can just dump a bunch of images on the page first that you get from the photograph, and then create lines out of them. So let's look at my poem. Okay, we're going to look at mines here. So Talking to My Sister on a Cool Afternoon is one of my recognized poems. It has been published multiple times, and it was published by Better Than Starbucks. It's in their print journal, and it's also on their website. It was also published by several other publishers. So let's zoom in on my poem here. Oh, okay. Let's zoom in. There we go. So when I wrote Mines, it was based upon a photograph that I had of me and my friends and my sister going to go see a concert, going to a concert of Destiny's Child. So I imagined that I was actually talking to my sister about it, reminding her, using the photo. That's why I say look down here in this photo. So I imagined that me and my sister was looking through photos, and I started talking about this one photo of us going to a concert of Destiny's Child. What I did first is I did a sort of imagery dump on the page. So I noticed in the photo there was moonlight. I remember that we lived in Oakland. And I made a note that she was wearing a hat and I am wearing a hat in the photo. So these are all photo images, things that I saw in the photo. I then made a little note of at least the type of photo that one of us have. Type of hat that one of us have. So mahogany, that was the color of my sister's hat. And then I made a note of what I'm doing, what we're doing in the photo. So here I made a note of what my sister was doing. She was holding the edge of her hat with her fingertips. So I just went on and just kept on writing images that I got from the photograph. And then I went on to write some things that might have going on at that time. That at that time we used mirrors to tell us how we look. We didn't ask each other. I remember that. I remember that my sister and us would sing. So we're singing Destiny's Child lyrics here. And I noticed that in the photo, My sister, I remember that at that time, my sister was singing the sexiest verse in the song, and then we all kind of joined in. So we were all like bouncing down the street singing a sexy part of the song by a song by Destiny's Child. And notice I didn't actually say the actual song because that was me adding some mystery. I was letting the reader to decide which song we could have been singing. That allowed me to let the reader put themselves in our shoes and pick the song that they would have sung if they were with us. All right. Sometimes you have to tell it slant and just let the line be mysterious. I did write down something that I noticed that we were doing then that we're not doing now. And I noticed that we're facing the camera more in the photo. So I did compare photos to this photo, like how we were versus then and versus now, versus when this photo was taken and versus how we are in photos now. That's what I was talking about earlier in this lesson about like adding some other stuff in your poem that's kind of bends the mind or just like catches the reader off guard. Something that tells a part of the poem is slant, or you kind of like teach something, a deeper lesson in the poem. So it's not just, it's not just what we're doing, but there's some lesson in here. There's a difference between how teenagers act, how young people acted back in the 90s versus how we act now when we go to concerts, and how we pose now when we take photos. So then and now. So I wanted to show how then we were different when we took photos. We acted different. We posed differently. Things were different. And then I note that we're not showing any body skin. So what this says is I'm suggesting or implying that now we show more skin in photos. So we're a little bit thirstier for attention than we were when we took the photo that this poem is for. So notice I say none of us showed any body skin. I'm saying when we took that photo. Okay? And then I kind of ended like, and our friends are much bigger than us. So it's important to be aware of how things are now versus how things were when you use your own photos, when some of your old photos were taken. That way you can kind of find unique lines or interesting lines to put in your work. They kind of show the changing of times. This is if you're using your own photos especially. It gets easier to show the changing of times, to pick lines to show the changing of times and the changing of you and your relationships when you're using your own photos. Unless, as I said, you have a good imagination and you can put yourself in the shoes of the people in photos that you're using that are not yours. Okay? And it's not you in the photo. That's why it's very important also to practice using your imagination as a writer. So you're not always stuck with only using your own photos and materials. You can use someone else's and just imagine that you're someone in the photo, if it's people in the photo. And then you can go from there. There's a much deeper lesson for this, but you would have to hire me to mentor you. I can teach you personally in a private, personal private lessons. And when I say personal, I mean like one-on-one, teach you various ways to write poetry using visual arts and other little tricks to get some interesting lines for your photo-based poem. Once again, always just make sure you have a bunch of photos already selected to choose from. There are so many ways you can write poems based upon visual arts, even different processes. But this should get you started, okay? Now, of course, after you write your lines, you can edit the lines, trim what you don't want, and then you could add the literary devices. So it's all up to you. Remember that publishers like tighter work. They like the work tight, the work tighter, because they like to, get their money's worth when they print their books. So they don't want you taking up unnecessary space. They don't want your work taking up unnecessary space in their journals and their books. So make sure you keep the work tight. See how that looks tight? And it's under 40 lines. So when you edit your poem, keep it under 40 lines. You're making it tight. Don't be afraid to choose words, nouns for the symbolism that you want for that line. Don't be afraid to do that. You can also have some pre-chosen literary devices that you're going to use, like sound, metaphor, hyperbole, metonymy. You can just use, pre-select them. So let's look here. I say photo. Oh, you hear the sound there? Pose, Oakland, photo. See, there's like the oh sound in that stanza. So you can do that. You can edit your words to celebrate a certain literary device. So the line celebrates a certain literary device. As I said, you want to make sure you pick a poetry prompt and exercise from the book, whatever you choose, one that you really connect to. I love writing poems and prose pieces, prose poems inspired by visual art. It's one of my favorite things to do. But sometimes I don't always use like physical version of visual art. Sometimes I will look at a painting and then imagine a whole new scene that may have come after that painting, and then I use that imagined scene that's in my mind, like a photograph pinned in my mind. I use that for my poem, for inspiration, or as my muse for my poem. You can pick multiple poetry exercises from one book and write several poems based upon each exercise, so that you end up creating a book of poems. So let's say, for example, you choose the Poetry Gymnasium book. You can pick maybe 5 poetry prompts, poetry exercises, and you can write 5 poems for each poetry exercise. That would give you 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. That would give you 25 poems, which would make it a chapbook of poems. See? But I recommend that if you're going to take this route, that when you pick a poetry exercise or prompt, you make that like the week that you write on that poem, that type of prompt or that type of exercise. So let's say I pick 5 poetry exercises or prompts from this book here. Week 1, I would just write only on one of those poetry exercises. That way that I micro focus on that poetry exercise, I micro focus on that type of poem that I'm writing, and nothing else disturbs my focus on it. And then once I have all the poems written on that poetry exercise, then the next week I would focus on a different poetry exercise only through that week and write poems only on the next poetry exercise. And then I would do that for about 5 weeks. Okay, it could even be 4 poems per exercise. You want at least 20 poems for your chapbook. Okay? Now, there are a lot of publishers that are looking for chapbooks and poetry books and poetry chapbooks right now. They are trying to get submissions before the end of the year. So this is a good time to do this exercise, this video, this lesson. If you want to know other approaches on how to use visual art to write poetry, I recommend that you hire me as soon as possible. My fee is very affordable. You will learn at least 3 different ways to use visual art to write a poem, and other tricks and tips that I know, how to write great lines and make your poem unique. This is for if you want to use visual art. So I am available to hire to teach you how to write poems inspired by visual art. This book here doesn't give you all the different ways. It doesn't. But it does get you started, and it does have an example. I have several example poems of my own that I've written, and various approaches and processes you can use to write your poems inspired by visual art. But you have to hire me to teach you. Okay? All right, if you enjoy this lesson, let me know. If you want to hire me to teach you how to write poems, or how to sketch, even just a sketch, because you can always use sketches for any type of poem. And I'm talking about literary sketches, creative writing sketches. So you should actually still be sketching using photographs, just so you can have something on the blank page to use for any type of creative writing project you may want to do in the future. If you're interested in hiring me to teach you how to write poems inspired by visual art, please email me or post a comment in reply to this video, so that I can contact you and we can set up a time for you to pay the very affordable fee, and we can start your lesson. It'll be at least about 2 weeks long, and you will definitely be writing poems inspired by visual art. And I mean also like photographs, paintings, postcards, and all of that, in different ways you can go about that. All right, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to let me know. Share this video with other writers, poets, prose writers, prose poems. This video can even be used by a prose poet. You don't have to be a poet. You could be a prose poet. You can even be someone that's trying to just get some poetic material for your story. This is a good way to do it. The Poetry Gymnasium book is available to read online. I didn't have to pay a fee. I found it under Google Books. So you can look up Google Books in Google and look up the Poetry Gymnasium. Okay, once again, thanks for watching. Bye.